Good evening, all of you. Welcome to another episode of our webinar series organized by the Ethugalpura Pioneers District Rover crew. Learning is not the product of teaching. It is the product of the activity of learners. This is a quote of John Holton, who is an American teacher and a leading education writer who advocated self-directed learning for children. That is when learning strategies come into action. What are those learning strategies? Aren't you curious to find out? We have found a masterpiece who can nourish us with a variety of learning strategies for our webinar today. He is Dr. Indika Karunathilake, Professor in Medical Education in Faculty of Medicine at University of Colombo. Sir, we warmly welcome you to our webinar. Before we get started, there is a quick reminder. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them on the chat. We will bring them up at the end of the presentation. Also, don't forget to update the Google form with your name to get a valuable e-certificate for this webinar. Sir, it's time for you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Nandi, for that very kind introduction. And also, I'm joining this session on learning with great pleasure because actually I'm also from the same area, originally from Kurunegala district, so it's a kind of privilege to give some kind of help to you also, especially the youngsters, young scouts as well. And apologies about the delay in starting because these days, due to the country situation, I had to be involved in several meetings related to COVID and the national level decision making. Anyway, now we are back in the session and probably we can start soon. And I'll be first providing you a brief overview about what is learning. And I understand that you have a wide range of participants within you from age 15 to 26. So I'll try to make this session or the presentation that would be applicable or relevant to everyone, to everyone's needs. And later we can have a brief discussion to see how this can be applicable in different settings. Okay, so the session is about learning and learning strategies. So first, let's understand what is learning, what is meant by learning. All of us talk about learning and all of us are interested about learning. But what actually is learning? The definition. There are many definitions of learning, One of the initial or the oldest definition of learning is learning as a change of behavior. Learning as a change of behavior. So this came from some famous research that some of you may be aware. When I go into details, you might remember. And there are other definitions also. Learning as construction of new knowledge. Okay, one is learning as change of behavior. Other one is learning as construction of new knowledge. So let's see. I think some of you might have heard about this gentleman or a scientist who conceptualized or who initially described that learning is a change of behavior. Okay? His name is Dr. Ivan Pavlov. Some of you might have heard about that. Okay? I'm sure now you must be familiar. At least some of you might have heard about this famous research by Pavlov, where a dog was given food and after some time, at the same time, a bell was rung. So later, the dog learned to respond, and that response was basically assessed by the salivation, because the food is given, the dog salivates, and at the same time, a bell was rung. So later, the dog has learned the relationship between the bell and the food, the stimulus. And later, even when the food was not there, when the bell was ringing, the dog started salivating. So the dog's behavior has changed, how the dog is responding. So this was one of the initial research. Okay. And this was a similar research conducted by another scientist. Again, a rat was put into a cage and then a stimulus was given. For example, when the rat pushes the lever in one particular way, the food is dispensed. If it is pushed in some other way, some kind of unfamiliar, unpleasant response, like the electrified grid being activated. So it's very painful. So later, and also if it is pushed in some other way, there is very painful light, high intensity light coming, or high intensity sound. So later, the rat has learned to push the lever in such way, either to get food or to avoid unpleasant responses or the stimuli. So again, change of behavior. And this was one of the earliest descriptions about learning. Learning as a change of behavior. This behavior is not only knowledge, but it is related to skills and attitudes also. Okay, yeah. And also, when you do something over and over again, what happens? Your skills get better and your knowledge becomes improved. Yeah. So this is the concept of knowledge, skills, and attitude has come from this initial concept that learning is change of behavior. And behavior is a combination of knowledge, skills, but not only knowledge and skills, you need attitudes as well. Okay, so the initial concept that learning is a change of behavior where there's a change in knowledge, the skills, and attitude. This is one of the earliest definitions of learning, which even to date it stands acceptable, even though not the complete explanation of learning, because there are many other complex aspects of learning also. But as a simple definition, a working definition of learning, we can use learning is a change of behavior. Okay. Then there's another definition that you learn new things. Every day you learn new things. And that new learning happens based on what you have learned previously. As scouts also, you may experience that you have learned certain things previously, and based on that you are learning new skills, maybe new strategies, new techniques, new skills, and linking with practical application and relevance. Again, as scouts, you would understand why and how it is so very important to link what you learn with practical application and the relevant, and how knowledge is organized. So that's another explanation of learning, that you have previous knowledge, you have some knowledge, and you build up the new knowledge on that. Why? Because this pre-knowledge is what you have learned previously, what has gone into your long-term memory. Therefore, it is stable memory. When compared to short-term memory, which may be unstable, what you have gone into your mind previously, which is strongly embedded in your mind. Okay, that is where the new knowledge can be anchored. For example, if you know about a certain thing, and when new piece of information come, it is very easy to connect to the prior knowledge. Then only the learning becomes more strong and more embedded. So that is very important. And again, no point of just learning about fascinating theories unless you can link up with the practical relevance. This you would know very well because you are also very keen about practical application of day-to-day activities. So this is another explanation about the learning and the context, learning in the context, and how to link up. When you learn, there is hardly any point of try to learn in isolated pieces. There's hardly any point of starting isolated pieces of information, because you can't remember them. You will not connect up, say, a list of 100 causes or a particular disease or maybe a particular reason. May not be very effective. Learning becomes very important only when you can connect up. Now, I don't think any of you can make any sense of what is there. Is isolated pieces of information, different colored boxes and shapes. You can't make any sense out of this. Why? Because you can't make connections, meaningful connections. Okay. Still, I don't think you can understand this because the connection is not clear. Still we can't imagine what this is. But now this is a little better. Now you are beginning to make connections. Initially, which was the isolated pieces of information, now you can make connections little better. Now, again, to better understanding, you need to understand the context, to the practical context where this situation occurs. Okay, now we have a better idea. I think now you see what I am trying to say. Rather than trying to learn isolated pieces of information, you should be able to connect. That is where the practical relevance comes into it. Why are we learning about this? Why are we learning science? Why are we learning agriculture? What are the reasons? How they connect with each other? This is where this very important learning tool of mind mapping comes into play. Some of you have heard about this mind mapping, where you can connect up different pieces of information. Now you can see this is a different kind of mind map with the starting central point, different ideas, branching and rebranching. And you can see the relationship between those areas. So one thing I want to learn about you is learn about these techniques. Mind mapping is a very strong technique where you can use to summarize a huge amount of information. Whether you are doing O levels, A levels, or university, this technique you can use and you can summarize a huge amount of information that is there in several chapters or books. You can summarize in one page using this technique. Central idea, then the topics branching and rebranching. You can use different colors, different images, everything in whatever way, because it's unique to you. Mind mapping is how the information is arranged in your brain. It's a visual representation of how information is arranged in your brain. So think about this technique. How we organize knowledge. Okay, how we organize knowledge, organization of knowledge. Say, when you see something, when sensory input, when you during day-to-day activities, you see so many things from your senses, visual, auditory, sensory. Okay, that goes into short-term memory, very short-term. Okay, initial sensory memory, then short-term. This memory you don't even remember. It goes into short-term memory. But unless you rehearse this over and over again, it will not go into long-term memory, which can be retrieved. I think this is very important piece. Now you must be remembering that even if you go to a lecture or a class, to a lesson, after few hours you have forgotten. But if you remember, if you rehearse that goes into your long-term memory. So this is very important. Sensory input can be auditory, can be visual, can be sensory, goes into sensory memory, short-term memory, rehearsal, long-term, and then out. Okay. This is very, very important. Organization of knowledge is very important. Why? Why? Our number of neurons in our brain. Those who have done science would know the number of neurons in our brain is limited. However, since most of you may be knowing about the structure of the neuron, the number of possible connections are unlimited. That is why the human brain, your capacity is enormous. The capacity of the human brain is enormous. You have to just unleash that huge capacity, because billions and billions of neurons and the amount of connection that you can make is unlimited. So this is how basically the neurophysiological basis of learning, where you can make so many neuronal connections, and that leads to learning. And those connections that are forming, they improve with time. They are very much formed. Why this is important? Because when a particular pathway, when particular information gets into your memory, those neuronal pathways are also activated. And if you this explains one thing. If you do something over and over again, what will happen? These pathways get stimulated over and over again, and they become like information superhighways. That's why you do some procedure over and over again, you become better at it. Say if you do a certain skill, maybe like you are scouting. Okay, if you do it so many times, then you can do that eyes closed, because your neuronal pathways has become a real information superhighway. So this explains learning of skills. If you do something and rehearsal. Okay. Yeah. So more and more are used, more and more they will get registered. That's very important. And if you don't study something for a long time, again we forget. So making connections are very important. Okay, and rehearsal. Now you see, after a few hours, this goes down and you will remember only very few. But what will happen if you learn this again, if you rehearse this goes up, again goes down, but then it stops at a higher baseline. If you rehearse it again, goes up, again goes down, and this is very much like immunization. Now these days we are talking about COVID immunization, so this also very much like immunization. If you rehearse immunization also, when you give booster dose, goes up, goes down, goes up, goes down. It's very much similar. Here also, you study. If you don't study for a long time, you forget. Only about 20% remains. But if you study, rehearse for the same day, this goes up, again goes down. Again, if you study, again goes up. Okay. Now you might ask, it's very difficult to read even once. Then how can we read over and over again? How can we rehearse over and over again? This is where the short note techniques or the mind mapping that I have mentioned comes into play. If you can summarize everything into few pages, then you can rehearse them as many times you want. Sometimes at a glance you can remember them. Then later you will remember that in your photographic memory. Not as points, not as text, but as photographic memory. Imagine we have done a mind map that will summarize everything that is there in one chapter. If you can remember that mind map as a photograph, that's what we call photographic memory. Okay, you can rehearse as many times and your retention will be very high. Very important. Again, connection. Just have a look. Can you remember this? The connections, very difficult. Okay, but can you see connections between? Remembering like this is very difficult. Generally, it is shown that human mind at a given time can remember a list about 6 to 8 points. That's why in PowerPoint also, we recommend only to give 6 to 8 points at a given time. 10 point, 20 points, we will not remember. But this also, now, this very difficult to remember. But you can make connections. Duck, okay, can be connected with water. Horse with grass. Hen with egg. Now the task is much easier. Making connections, okay? Very important. From the beginning, I have been highlighting the importance of making connections and summarizing. Now you see why this is so important. And the importance of getting the short-term memory into your long-term memory. That's very important. Okay. Now you are realizing why learning is important, why making connections are important, why rehearsal is so important. And when learning, try to activate as many parts in your brain. Now, if you just listen to this, okay, then your auditory part is activated. And if you look at the PowerPoint, your visual part is activated. If you really like this, then your emotional component is activated. If you really think about this and link with your experience, then this aspect is activated. So, when you are learning, try to activate as many parts as possible. The motor part, auditory part, sensory, not only that, your emotions, everything. You should like what you are learning. Okay? You should be interested about what you are learning. You should enjoy your learning. Then only learning will become more important, more interesting, and more effective. Therefore, learning, try to activate as many parts in your brain. Now, this is very important. Okay? This is the cortex of the brain. Okay? From say young age and then into say your teenage and into 20s, okay, and how the gray matter connections are appearing, and then how the brain capacity is appearing. Now there is a small this area in this section. This is what we call the thalamus and the hypothalamus. This area, the thalamus area, is very much related to your emotions. You can see the cortex area, which is related to critical thinking. This blue area where it's related to critical thinking, decision making, are gradually evolving as time goes on. These are actually very sophisticated MRI images. When you are in year 5, then it's more like the thalamic and that kind of involuntary part. As time goes on, this critical thinking part takes over. Okay. Here also this thalamic activity you can see very clearly. As time goes on, this part or the critical thinking part takes over. How this can be linked to your development, because at your young age you are very emotional, isn't it? Very emotional, very impulsive, and you can have different emotions, attraction. Why all these things happen? Because the thalamic activity, the emotional component takes over. As youngsters, the emotional component takes over. As time goes on, the critical thinking aspect takes over, and then you will become more, say, evidence-based decision making comes into play. But as youngsters, you can be very emotional. Sometimes you can get upset about small things, okay? And relationships, all these things comes into play because the emotional component is very strong during young age, during teenagers. So this also explains the different aspects of your development, okay? And what you want to do, what you like to do, different aspect, relationships, learning, all these things. One big reason is the brain development, the neuro physiological development of your brain. That explains partly. Now you may realize some reasons of the behaviors of the teenagers and youngsters. It's not nothing wrong, but it can be partly explained by this the physiological neurophysiological basis. Yeah. And I have mentioned, if you want your learning to be effective, try to activate as many parts in your brain as possible. Because if you just read, you will retain only 10%. If you hear, 20%. Images, 30 more. Okay. And if you do hands-on or work with others, collaborating. Now, for you also, teamwork is very important. Okay. Real life experience and teaching someone. Then your retention would be higher. This is very important. If you just read, in your experience also it will say that if you just read, retention is very low. But if you combine all these things, then the learning would be much more effective. This is what the same thing that I have mentioned, that try to activate as many parts in your brain and work together, teach others, okay, hands on. When you combine all these, then the learning is going to be very effective. Reading skills are very important. You should be able to become fast learners. It's a very good skill that you need to have. There are some who can read very fast within hour. You can there are some who can read so many pages and assimilate the knowledge that are there. Okay, and if you are used to reading from the childhood, then this becomes very easy because your reading speed is automatically fast. So from now onwards, try to develop your reading skills. Okay, very important, because faster readers are good learners, very fast learners who can basically compile the information very quickly than others, and they can be very effective in learning. Yeah, there are techniques. I think some of you have heard about those. Basically, the idea is, now some of you, when you are reading, you may be just reading just word by word, very slowly, from A to Z. If you take a book, you are reading A to Z. Okay. When you are reading novel or something like that, you can read that in that way. But that also you can read very fast. Here the idea is, first you get the idea, then you read selectively. When you are reading a technical paper or chapter, this kind of approach would be more appropriate. It's like this. When you are building a huge, say, structure, building, you are not building every room and all the furniture, everything doesn't come at one go. No. First the building structure, then the concrete comes in, then other thing comes in. The refinement comes later. Similarly here also, if you want to read an area related, say your maybe a chapter or maybe a lesson, first go through this very quickly, very fast. Go through this very quickly, get an idea of overall idea, overall structure, and then read selectively. This is what we call the SQ3R technique. SQ3R technique was skim, scan, survey. Skim, scan, survey. That means go through this very quickly. Go through quickly and get an idea. Skimming is basically like skim milk, get the essence. Scan is go through the area. Go through the area very quickly, like in scanning. Survey is identify what are the boundaries. Once you have done that, you question yourself. What I have understood? Have I got the full idea? How you do this is, first read the heading. When you read the heading, you will get a good idea. Then there are subheadings. Read the subheadings. Then you have a good idea about what the structure of this lesson. Then read the introduction, read the conclusion. You will get a better idea of what this is about. Read the title, introduction, conclusion. And read the title, introduction, of the subheadings. Okay. While doing this, actually you can do a mind map also. Get the title as the central idea, then subheadings as branching areas. Okay. And for each paragraph, because generally in a well-written article or a lesson, one paragraph is one idea. So each paragraph, read the first sentence and the last sentence. Now you get a good idea what each paragraph is all about. With this way, you can get a very good idea of what you have read, the overall structure of the lesson. Then question yourself, what have you understood? And then read selectively. But you have to, maybe you can read it loud, then you are activating your auditory part. Maybe you can have a short note, then you are activating your motor, the muscles part, motor cortex. And later, of course, if you review, if you have done a mind map, then it's much easier to revise. This is what we call the SQ3R technique. Okay, very effective technique in speed reading. And similarly, when you read, most of you read just word by word, letter by letter. Okay, small children also do it in that way. When they are reading, say they read like CAT cat, BAT bat, in that way. But when you grow, we don't do that anymore. Then you can basically capture words, and some more sophisticated readers can capture one sentence at one glance. Even faster, some people can capture one paragraph at one glance. How do you do that? Okay, not in this way. If you read in this direction, you can basically capture one paragraph at one glance. If you can read in this direction, your eye movement, you can capture sections at one glance. That's why you may remember that some books have two columns. Why? Because it's easier for you to capture information in one glance because the width is less. Okay, so now you have learned about SQ3R technique. Now we have learned about how to capture the information very quickly. These things will improve your reading speed tremendously. But don't expect magic in one day. Develop your skills. Unless you are a naturally fast learner, it might take some time for you to develop these skills, but you can definitely do that. Listening, very important. Now, don't get, say, annoyed by maybe sometimes you might not be very pleasant about a particular lecturer or a teacher or a tutor, but don't have these emotions block you from learning from that person. Okay? Always be prepared by using the previous technique, like the fast reading technique. Before the lesson, you can find out what are you going to learn about today. Okay? The topic, and read before the class. Then you are at an advantage. Okay? Be a very active learner, listener, take notes, ask questions. In that way, you'll be a very effective learner. And when you're answering questions also, very important, read the question very carefully. There are some keywords in your questions like describe, vistara karanna, pahadili karanna. So each keyword means something. Okay? Now, listing is different from describing. Discussing is different from listening or describing. Vistara karanna, sakachcha karanna. There's a difference. Describe is you just describe. But sakachcha karanna or discuss is you have to go more into depth. So there you have to identify the keywords in your question, read it very carefully, plan your answer, and write specific points. One idea, one paragraph. Okay. Mind mapping I have mentioned previously. Very, very important technique to improve your learning skills. And when you are studying also, okay, when you are studying, try to find out a place, a comfortable place, but not too comfortable because otherwise you might go into sleep. And good lighting, very important. Good lighting is very important. Work desk should be a pleasant, uncluttered place. Okay, so all these are very important. Learning environment is very important for effective learning. Okay, and repetition. Now you know why it is important. use all the possible senses, active recalling of information, and always try to relate to what you have previously learned and build upon the existing knowledge. Okay, so what I have summarized within this very short time is the principle of learning, what is learning, and what are the conceptual understanding behind learning, and the theories of learning, how you can practically apply them, and the need for practical application, building up the prior knowledge, and linking and making connections between different learning areas, and try to activate as many parts of your brain. So all these ultimately will help you to become a better learner. Okay, so with that, we come to the end of the initial presentation. Now we can open this for any questions that you need clarification. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for nourishing us with such great learning strategies. Also, so for giving your valuable time for us. I'm sure those learning tips will be very important and fruitful for each and every rower present here today. So now we will move ahead for the question. Over to you, Nadu.
Thank you, Randi. Beforehand, we proceeded the Q&A session. Just a reminder, the Slido link is open for your questions. So please find the Slido link in the chat box and post your questions there. Sir, we have received a few questions.
Sure.
So we have received a few questions from the audience. First of all, I'd like to go with this question. So what is the scientific reason for saying that engaging in extracurricular activities boost our learning capacity and such things?
Okay, good. Yeah. I think it can be explained by some of the areas that we have discussed also, because that will basically link to the practical application of what you are doing. I say one example. Sports. Now you might want to learn about a certain particular area, say maybe certain joint or body structure, maybe about maybe a body joint or something like that. But if you are involved in sports, say some kind of sports where you might get injuries, so you can easily link your learning with that. I'm just giving one example. And maybe some of the practical activities that you are doing as scouts also can be linked very easily with what you are learning. Some of the social services that you are doing can be linked into whatever that you are learning with the, say, the some areas or some content area that you will be learning in the school. That is one area. Other one is the emotional component, because if you are involved in extracurricular activities, you are doing that because of your interest. And if you can link that with your learning, then you are doing that with pleasure. You enjoy that. You enjoy what you learn and you enjoy what you are doing. So the important thing is connecting your learning with what you are doing. In that way, it would be very enjoyable and very effective. Yeah. So, I mean, it's a matter of, say, prioritizing and making connections.
Yeah, thank you, sir. And the next question is that we know that there are two types of learners called visual learners and auditory learners. So he's asking that how could I identify whether I fall to visual or auditory learner? What is the best suitable method that could be implemented for myself or somebody asking the question?
All right. Yeah. It's like this. I mean, it's you talk about three kinds of learners. That is called, one is called visual, and other one is called auditory. Visual is the what you are seeing. Other one is auditory. Other one is kinesthetic. That one is you learn by seeing. Others learn by listening. Others learn by doing. But when it comes to real life, okay, when it comes to real life, nobody in this world is completely auditory, completely visual, completely kinesthetic. Nobody in this world is completely like that. So my advice is, try to make use of all the modalities that are possible when you are making a learning experience. If you want to make it effective, try to make use of all three modalities: visual, kinesthetic, and auditory. Not only that, emotional also. So all these things come from that. But if you really want to identify what kind of learner are you, there are many questionnaires. One is called VARK, visual auditory, VARK questionnaire, and then there is another one called Honey and Montfort. If you do a Google search, you can find out about those tools. I mean, if you are interested, you can apply those tools on yourself, answer those questions, and find out what kind of learner are you. But practically, it is not very important, because all of us are not completely auditory visual. None of us do that. No. So what you want to realize is you need to identify what you enjoy most. That's the most important thing. In learning, identify what you enjoy most. Some people like drawing. Some people might like doing something practical. Some people might like to teach someone else. Okay. Try to identify what you enjoy most and try to make use of that. But having said that, you need to employ all the three modalities.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I hope that answer would provide a better idea for the person who asked the question. And then let's move to the next question. So how could I develop a photographic memory?
How could I develop photographic memory? No?
Yeah.
Photographic memory. Okay. Actually, some people are very good at this photographic memory. Naturally, they are gifted. Sometimes you may remember when you remember your say, now let's go back to your experience in your exams. Okay, now when you go to your exams, when you answer a question, sometimes you may remember situations where the pages comes into your mind. Okay, the whole page comes into your mind. Why? Because you have seen that whole page over and over again. So it is basically photocopied in your mind and it comes back. Then the answering is easier. So this is one tool that you can use to improve photographic memory, is what I mention as mind mapping. Okay? Because they are in different ways. You can use colors, you can use arrows, you can use connections, images, everything. Okay? So you summarize a huge amount of information. Not only summarize, you make connections also. Once you have done that, you can have these images. Maybe you can have your own style. You can develop your mind map. Maybe you can have this like a flashcard system, flashcards, and you can look at them whenever you are free, or you can paste them in your wall. All these things are possible. So make sure you look at them as many times as possible. Look at them as many times as possible. Used to that, you can even basically go through them within seconds. When you become a very fast reader, you can go through that within seconds. There you are not looking at individual image or word or letter. You look at the whole photograph, whole mind map. Okay. So mind mapping is a very effective technique, and rehearsing is combined with rehearsing. That's the best way to develop the photographic memory.
Yes, and also somebody has asked that, so could you provide some tips to making effective mind map?
Okay, yeah, I have shown one example, but it's only one way. Again, maybe that needs a different session. Yeah, but anyway, I might be able to send you some maybe presentations on mind mapping, or probably yes, there are some information available with me which I can send to you. But the basic rules are: there's a central point. Okay, there's a central point. The central idea. Maybe say Rudira Paddhati, Rudira Vahini Paddhati, or something like that. Okay, and then the ideas branching and rebranching. Say Rudira Vahini Paddhati, you can say then Hridaya view here, the structure of the heart. Then the arteries Rudira Damani Shira. Then you can branch them, branching and rebranching, classification. But not only classification, you should be able to make connections between different areas, and you can use different colors. Maybe, for example, the arteries can be red, the vein can be blue, but you are not drawing them, you are just classifying them. And generally one rule is one central point, and then you draw lines, and lines also sometimes you draw like curves, because it is also based on the belief that it's more easy on the eye. So you can write on the line, write on the curve. because the curve is more close to nature. Now, if you put lines like very mechanical kind of lines, straight lines, it will look very mechanical, like maybe electric circuit, may not be very friendly on the eye. But if you draw like curves, like I have shown previously, would be easier to pick up because it's easy on the eye. Curvy lines, use different colors, use lettering, okay. Sometimes the rule is to say capital lettering. The person who has introduced mind mapping to world, one popularized, is called Tony Buzan. So if you search Tony Buzan's work on mind mapping, the rules are there. But those rules are just use them as guidelines because mind map is your own creation. So it is the way that information is arranged in your brain. I mean, know about those guidelines, but develop your own style. You can have your own style.
Yeah, thank you, sir. And the next question is, can we learn a new subject or new thing at any age of our lifetime?
I suppose we can. Yeah, that's called relearning and new learning. Yeah, it will be easier. One is if you are say a committed learner, and also it will be easy if you can connect with your previous experience. I mean, the secret of learning something new is always the same principle. You should be able to connect up with what you already know. Say now, most of you may be doing, say, assume, say, biology, okay? But say if you want to learn mathematics, you can build up on your previous mathematical knowledge. So always try to connect up with your prior knowledge. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Before we move to the next question, just a reminder, the Slido link is open for your questions. So, dear participants, please, if you have any questions, please post your questions in the Slido link. The next question is about our project star. That we know that Rovers have to do 4 stars and one is called a project star. And here is asking that, sir, can you provide practical ways to manage our time during the project start?
Yeah, again, yeah. Uh, yeah, so this basically, I suppose the question is about time management. Yeah, time management also, there are certain principles. There are many principles in time management, but the one thing you need to learn is time goes on. It is not a finite resource. Overall time is infinite, but the time we have is a limited resource. So important is prioritizing. So what you have to identify is what are the urgent things and important. Urgent, not urgent. Important, not urgent. Important. So if you classify them like that, you would know how to basically handle the time management. Okay. So there are urgent and important, which you have to do. Okay? And there are urgent things, but may not be very important. Those things maybe you can delay or delegate. Okay? And there are certain things that are important but not very urgent. Those things you can do later. So there are different ways. You can delegate, you can immediately attend, you can postpone, and there are non-urgent, not important, which you can drop. Okay. So these are different strategies in time management. Same thing, it's a prioritization.
Thank you, sir. The next question is about the online learning activities which is done these days. So how could we keep our concentration in online learning activities?
Yeah, be an active learner. That's the most important thing. Yeah, when you are following something online, before also try to learn about what you are going to learn in online learning and be prepared for that. Then you are prepared to what teacher is telling and be active learner. Always be active learner. Use a chat feature or try to discuss with others. In that way, you can gain the best out of what you are learning. And also maybe later the video will be available. The most important aspect is if you are an interactive learner, then your learning would be more effective.
Yeah. And another question is about the exams that we are facing many exams during our life. So here it is asking that, so how we could boost our memory capacity.
how could you use your memory capacity? It's not exactly memory capacity. If it is how you basically face the exam. So each exam you need to understand the exam structure and what is assessed, what competencies are assessed in that particular exam. So there may be some skills examination, there may be some knowledge examination. So like that you have to identify what are the competencies or objectives that are assessed in that particular exam. So you have to understand that exam, what are the areas that will be tested, what competencies or objectives will be tested. That is very important. Then prepare before accordingly, and that is where you need to go through your past exam papers and then practice, rehearse as much as possible. It is not really memory is only part of it. You can have good memory, but if your exam technique is poor, you will not do well. Okay, learning is one thing, but doing well in exam is another thing. That is where going through past papers and training as much as possible, answering them and getting the feedback becomes very important. And during the exam also, reading the question very carefully, understand the keyword. I have mentioned previously, the keywords mean a lot of things. When the question is asked listing, then no point of describing. When the question is describing, no point of listing. So read the question very carefully and plan your time, because you will be marked only if you answer. So if there are 4 questions, if all 4 questions are given equal marks, no point of dedicating more time on one question. So very important, the moment you get the question paper, read the question very carefully. Okay, then once you are answering some questions, your mind is working on planning other questions also. That's very important. And plan timing. For example, if there are 4 hours for the question paper and if there are 4 questions, you know that for each question you have to allocate about half an hour, 30 minutes. And part of that time would be for the planning. That's where a very quick mind maps comes into play, very important. And if there are part questions, then again time management becomes very important, because if one question has 4 parts and one part has 50 marks allocated, then obviously you need to dedicate more time on answering that, and also answer to the point. Okay? Read the question very carefully, plan your timing, okay, and answer the question to the point. And good handwriting. If you can't write good handwriting, at least big lettering, and maybe underline the important points, diagrams, clearly labeling, all these are very important.
Thank you, sir. And that's bring up to the end of the Q&A session. So to continue with the proceedings, it's over to Randi.
Thank you, Nadul. Now I invite Farmika to deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Randi. Good evening, everyone. I consider it as my great pleasure and honor to deliver the vote of thanks behalf of you. First of all, I would like to pay my sincere gratitude to today's speaker, Professor Dr. Indika Karunathilake, Professor in Medical Education, Department of Medical Education, Faculty of Medicine, University of Colombo, who duly accept our invitation and delivered a remarkable section on the role of volunteers in learning strategies today. Then I would especially thank Mr. Srilad Silva, Assistant Chief Commissioner, Rover and IT of Sri Lanka Scout Association, as well as Dr. Asanka Eriava, National Headquarters Commissioner, who was the founder of a Scout Master of Ethugalpura Pioneers District Rover Crew, for the immense guidance and inspiration of provide for us to make this webinar a success. I would also like to extend my thanks to District Commissioner of Kurunegala District Scout Association, Mr. U.B. Disanayaka, and Assistant District Commissioner, Rovers, Mr. Kulathilaka Vijay Sundara, for their well wishes. I would convey my heartiest gratitude to our beloved Rover Scout Master of Ethugalpura Pioneers District Rover Crew, Mr. Chanaka Halegolla, as well as Rover Scout Mistress of Ethugalpura Pioneers Girls District Rover Crew, Mrs. E.W. Aryamala, for your guidance and support provided us in organizing this webinar. It's a great fault of mine if I forget to thank my dear all fellow Rovers, Scout of Ethugalpura Pioneers District Rover Crew, who were behind the scenes. Without your courage and dedication, there won't be any successful webinar like this. Last but not least, I would like to thank all the participants who joined with us to make this webinar a success. I hope you could grab a better knowledge and learning strategies from today's section. Thank you. Stay safe. Over to you, Randi.
Thank you, Alnika. So, dear participants, please switch on your videos to take the photograph. Thank you, everyone. So, that is the end of another great session. Thank you, everyone, for attending this webinar, and we were so delighted by the attendance we had. Dear participants, you were with us throughout our Pioneers of Tomorrow webinar series, which is a series of 9 webinars. You encouraged us throughout our journey. Now we have come to an end of our webinar series. It's a great pleasure to have you all, and thank you for being with us. And let's meet soon with another adventure. Till then, stay safe and happy scouting.